I am delighted that the Marketing Society have asked me to share my thoughts on being a change maker. I started working at the age of 18 and absolutely loved it. Work is not just something I do when I'd rather be doing something else. And at age 90, I still average a solid 25-hour work week. In 1962, I founded my software company, Freelance Programmers. Oh, it was then a very different society, and not a kind one. In the 1960s, women were undervalued, underpaid, or worse, victims of active discrimination. The sciences were not considered respectable for girls of my generation, and I'd had to go to a boys' school to get my tuition in maths. Women couldn't drive a bus, work on the stock exchange. We'd routinely get fired on marriage or pregnancy. In 1962, I needed my husband's signature to open the company's bank account. Even in the States, until 1974, women generally had to have male authorization to get a credit card. No, it was not easy for a woman to start a business. My initiative was to provide bespoke software at a time when software was included in the hardware, so provided for free. People laughed. No one would buy software, least of all from a woman. I proved them wrong. There was a certain amount of dissembling. All our programmers worked from home, and when we were on the phone, we drowned out domestic noises by playing a tape of somebody clicking on a typewriter. And when my promotional letters, and they were all letters in those days, went unanswered, I started signing them with the family nickname Steve. Steve Shirley's letters were replied to. Ambitious women have flat heads. That comes from being patted patronizingly all the time. It was a struggle to get recognized as a serious businesswoman. The company's success came from always surrounding myself with people who are much smarter than me, women who wanted to work, had a strong work ethic, and worked in teams. They were a delight to manage. And there was an element of luck. We got what would now be a £500,000 job programming the black box flight recorder for supersonic Concorde when we were only 3 years old and about 9 people strong. That helped our credibility enormously. I was the company's prime salesperson for years, so the marketing budget was tiny. It was me. In the early days, we spoke about our campaign for women and were very aware that everything we did, from logo to services, contributed to our brand, though we didn't use the term until we were about 20 years old. We were self-taught and lacked business school experience training to help steer us. People talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, but I'm an example of post-traumatic growth. My refugee start helped me to cope with change, especially valuable in the digital world, and made me determined to lead a life that has been worth saving. Sounds very pious, I know, but that's how it was and still is. I do not fritter my time away. I've learned that mistakes are not fatal. Indeed, they can be a route to innovation. And an organization cannot thrive without innovation. As James Joyce said, mistakes are the portals of discovery. And that can be discovery about yourself. It's linked up with risk. So take a position which scares you a bit, then you'll never be bored and can grow. I believe 3 things are really necessary for success. You have to distinguish yourself from the competition. You must always focus on your vision, and always, but always, give more than is expected. On a personal level, I identify with the powerless, starting by acknowledging my own privileged position. I try always to practice empathy, to inform myself of the barriers other people face. I always seek to engage and connect with diverse perspectives, take action, and advocate for change. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dame Stephanie. Can I call you Dame Stephanie?
No, I like to be called Steve, please, Sophie. I think it's much more friendly.
Thank you, Steve. Well, I wanted to start by talking about being an entrepreneur. What extent do you think entrepreneurs now have to cope with a very different set of challenges to you?
It's very different. I used to run my company on minimum cost and aim to pull the company up by its bootstraps, each year earning enough to invest in the future. I mean, nowadays, I'd expect to have to raise big money to fuel rapid growth and scale in fast-moving industries. And apart from access to funding, entrepreneurs have to cope with saturated markets, regulatory hurdles, talent acquisition so important, technological disruption, and cybersecurity threats, as well as the overall economic uncertainty. I am glad not to be responsible for an enterprise now.
Leaders do need to look at their resilience. Was resilience a concept as such in the 1960s? I know you've talked a lot about strength. I loved it when you said, strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but rather the ability to persist in spite of it. Tell me about that.
Sounds very clever. Yeah. I mean, entrepreneurs, we're remembered for our successes, but it's the way we cope with failures that actually distinguishes the entrepreneur. I never heard of resilience until after the financial crisis of 2008. People spoke of my fortitude and tenacity, but they probably just thought I was foolhardy. When I started, I went out of my way to meet a few other businesswomen. There weren't very many. They were generous with their time, but were wholly financially oriented, which put me off. The company I had in mind was a social company with metrics in terms of employment opportunities for women with children working from home long before it became fashionable.
So in the piece just now, you talked about getting one of the major contracts that made a difference to the business. What was it like negotiating those major contracts as a woman in the 1960s? Are there any lessons?
Well, one thing that helped was actually my gender. That helped in negotiating major contracts so that people remembered us as standing out from the men. A few organisations, the Family Planning Association was one, actually felt more comfortable dealing with women. I was also targeting American companies trading in the UK because they were more amenable to the concept of outsourcing, and they liked my English accent. I used to lose my temper, which is disastrous for human relationships. It takes weeks to forget a harsh word. But family tragedy helped put work into perspective, and I haven't lost my cool for 25 years. I hire people on values. They can learn whatever's needed, but values are well nigh rigid. I advise people to concentrate not on what they want to do, but rather who it is that they want to become.
I think that's an incredible principle. So when we hear about your life today, there are so many incredible achievements. But I know there have also been some lows as well as the highs, some personal costs. How did you come out of those?
Well, my worst lows took me into deep depression, Sophie. I mean, it's fairly classic for traumatised children, apparently. But I finished up in hospital for a month and off work for a year. That's a long time for a workaholic like me. With professional help, I recovered, having learnt some important lessons, I was not Superwoman. I could say no to requests, and I could get a better work-life balance for myself as well as offering it to others.
It's incredible to see what you've done post-retirement and your philanthropic work. What's also particularly interesting is when you were still running your company, how you talked about the triple bottom line: financial, environmental, and social. I think most people do understand the first two, but how would you describe the social bottom line?
Well, this is the one that I'm most interested in. The social bottom line includes community engagement, staff well-being, and ethical practices. So it can involve issues related to diversity and inclusion, philanthropy, and fair labour practices.
And I know you said that you wanted to feel that your life was worth saving. No one could possibly deny that that is true. But what else would you like to be known for?
I think it has to be seeing global market opportunity for software separately from the hardware. And that, presumably, is why I was invited here.
Thank you so much, Dame Stephanie, Steve. You said, the more I give, the richer my life becomes. Thank you for giving your time today and for making our lives richer.
Thank you for making it so easy, Sophie. Thank you.